Acid based here with Marco. Acid based here with Frank. So we're here with Marina.
I'm here with Sam.
Acid based here with Samir, freight carrier sitting with Fook. Acid based here with Duke. Acid based here with Augie. Acid based here with Hector. Acid based here with Dayan.
Jeden pileček.
What is going on, everybody? Happy Friday. Welcome to episode 6 of Acid Base. Going to be joined today by Dan Artaev, founder of Artaev at Law PLLC. We got 2 of the 3 founders of Carrier Defender here today. Just before we hop into today's episode, got to get through the efrouting top hauls of the week. Coming in at the number 1 spot for drive-in, we're going to have a Madison, Wisconsin over to Saginaw, Michigan. Coming at 450 miles at almost $4 on the high end, 2.5 on the low end. Jumping into a Junction City, Kansas, or to Fayetteville, Arkansas, 420 miles, 2.2 to 3.7 on the high end. Some variance on drive-in, probably due to the weather. And we got a Milwaukee over to Columbus, 477 on the miles, 2.96 to 3.7 on the high end. The second best refill, we got a Kirksville, Missouri to Warsaw, Indiana. 450 on the miles, 2.8 to 3.8 on the high end. Tons of variance. Getting into flatbed, we got that Iowa City, Iowa, over to Findlay, Ohio, 460 miles, 3.8 to 4.3. And a Saginaw, Michigan, over to Nashville, Tennessee, 617 on the miles, 2.64 to 3.2 on the high end. Getting into the best loop for a drive-in. I'm going to start out in Alexandria, Minnesota. Over to Carlisle, PA, over to Muncie, Milwaukee, Findlay, back to Alexandria. Normal work week, I average around 7.1 to 8.2 on the gross. Not too bad for a drive-in. Getting into the best flatbed loop. I'm going to start out in Lufkin, Texas, over to Muncie, Indiana, head over to Milwaukee, over to Findlay, Chicago, back to Lufkin, another normal work week, 8.6 to 10.5 on the high end for flatbed. So definitely cooking something on the flatbed side of things. And hopping into reefer. This started in Marshall, Minnesota, over to Columbus, Ohio, Milwaukee, Allentown, back to Marshall. 8.2 to 9.5 on the high end. There's some pretty average reefer rates these days. Let's hop into today's show with that. What's going on, man?
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me. I love the new intro, by the way. I feel like I'm in a rap video.
Yeah, I mean, we're business partners on Carrier Defender, but you know, a little too busy with the law stuff to check out the updates.
No, I love it. I love it. I'm glad to be a part of it too.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here on a Friday and making the time. You just released your article, Are false online reviews of trucking companies protected by the First Amendment? So let's hop into that one today.
Yeah, I did. And happy Valentine's Day, by the way. Thanks for taking the time to spend it with me.
Yeah, we had a nice little back and forth there.
I appreciate it.
Imagine anyone in my life, I'd rather spend Valentine's Day with than you.
My wife would disagree, but here we are.
Yeah. Let's get into this First Amendment stuff.
Yeah,
what's going on in the trucking industry? Are people thinking they're protected by the First Amendment?
Yeah. And this is kind of just a follow-up. I've been writing a lot about false reviews impacting the trucking business. And, you know, you get on platforms out there like Highway, like Carrier 411, and, you know, where brokers write reviews of truckers they've dealt with and the damage that can be done. That's really what I've written about. That's really what Carrier Defender, a lot of it's about, helping people out. And just one of the continuing themes that I've witnessed as I've tried to help out carriers or anybody impacted by false reviews, I've run into this issue. What about the First Amendment right? What do you mean I can't write whatever I want online about a business? You know, isn't there a First Amendment right protecting me? And so I decided to write this article to just kind of respond to that and educate people about the limits of the First Amendment when it comes to statements that are false or defamatory and hurt businesses.
Yeah. And I mean, I think these are things that people sort of use, you know, on like a Facebook or X type of thing, where it's like more personal to personal communications where just feelings are getting hurt, you know? But unfortunately, in logistics, it's not just feelings. It can be millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars of freight, you know, lost freight profits when these reviews go up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of why people get lawyers involved, because when their trucks are standing still because of something somebody wrote online, that's real damage to a business. And this article kind of came about from an experience that I had. I was advocating on behalf of a carrier, just trying to resolve an issue they were having with a broker. I mean, I won't get into too many specifics, but the situation is probably familiar to a lot of people. Carrier was waiting to get paid by the broker, was waiting. The broker said, "Hey, check's in the mail. We're going to pay you." Carrier's waiting. It's been months. Carrier decided to, you know, I'm going to go file against the bond, right? And whenever somebody files against the bond, a lot of people get really, really mad about that, right, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, in this day and age, Amazon can bring pretty much anything you can imagine to your doorstep in like 24 hours. But when it comes to those checks that a broker just put in the mail, they seem to take months and months and months to get to you.
Yeah, so it was kind of an egregious situation where they were just saying, "Oh, we sent you the check a month ago." And the carrier's like, "No, you didn't." So anyway, they filed on the bond of the broker. Broker got mad, wrote this freight guard review, claiming that the load was delivered with temperature variations. I believe that this was a reefer load, and you know, but this was false because Costco took shipment. There were no notes about any sort of
clean bills, all this stuff.
clean bills. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I go try to get this resolved with the posting broker, and I say, look, you guys are clearly in the wrong here. Here's all this documentation. Get this rate guard down. And the guy goes to me. He's like, I have a First Amendment right to post whatever I want on the internet, and cited a Supreme Court case from 1961. So I said, thank you for citing that case. Here's another case from your state of Oregon after that Supreme Court case that says you can't publish false statements of fact, and that's not protected by the First Amendment when it is basically harmful speech. And
I mean, I always make this joke with you, I'm sure you run through, you're a real lawyer, and I feel like there's these people out there who think that they might be lawyers, and they just grab like a court case or two and just cling on to them with dear life. I'm sure you run into that pretty often.
It was just funny. The guy's like, here's a Supreme Court case. I said, great. I will take your Supreme Court case and raise you another case that says something else completely.
I mean, let's jump into your first part of this article, fact versus opinion. Is this going to be obviously the starting point when we come into like determining the false statements and that, right?
Yeah, and I've said this before, and that's really what it comes down to: defamation, where defamation is defined. It's like, okay, you can certainly have statements of opinion. You can post as many statements of opinion, no matter how negative they are, but that's what's protected speech: statements of opinion. Like, I can say, I think Alex Bates is the worst podcaster in history. And that's my opinion.
Hey, there might be some people that agree with you on that one. We won't even lie.
Well, I'm just saying, or somebody can go onto Google and say Dan Artaev did not
Dan Artaev probably sucks at Skyrim.
or something like that. And this is their opinion about my personality, or he's not a handsome gentleman or something like that. But again, these are statements of opinion. They're subjective. It's, I guess maybe a better example is the restaurant context. You go to a restaurant and you said, terrible food, I don't like it. That's my statement of opinion. That's protected by the First Amendment all day, every day. I go into a restaurant and I say, I see rats in the restaurant. That's a statement of fact. That's something that you can prove objectively. And if that statement is false, it constitutes defamation. Defamation is something you can sue for because it damages businesses. So same thing in trucking. That's the first thing you got to understand, is that statements of opinion. This is the worst driver I've ever seen. He can't drive. That's probably a statement of opinion that's not going to be protected or not going to be actionable in any court. But somebody was late, somebody misdelivered a load, things like that. Those are statements of fact.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, going back to that first example when we got into this is, you said that the temperatures on the reefer were wrong, this and that. That's all fact-based, which obviously you had paperwork to show that that's not true, and that's where they get into defamation, right?
Yeah, we even got an email from Costco confirming that, in fact, the load was delivered with no problems.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, getting into like the false reviews, not protected speech. I mean, where are we getting into with that?
Well, false reviews again. That's got to be a statement of fact. Somebody writes down, this load was misdelivered with temperature fluctuations. That's false, and damages the business.
So, I mean, what type of protections would people have when it comes into posting these online reviews? They would obviously have to be careful with, statements of fact that can be like proven wrong. Is that basically the main thing they'd have to watch out for?
I always say, if you're going to post something, make sure it's factual, it's backed up by evidence, and you're ready to, back it up.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the thing with all these reviews, right? Is a lot of them, you read them and you can tell that they're pretty emotional. But when it gets into these reviews, what kind of standing is there for statements of opinion, right? Those are all protected. They can say, I think that this carrier is the worst carrier on God's earth. Like, I mean, those are all protected statements, I would assume.
that's a statement of opinion. And I mean that in the United States, we do have the First Amendment. And if you remember, the whole point of the First Amendment is so people can criticize their government and whatever
Yeah,
else.
that's where it started, I would assume.
That's where it started. So that's kind of where it is. It does not let you just say whatever, especially when that speech is harmful. And the interesting thing is, the writing this article made me think of a law school case that we studied. 15 years ago was when I was in law school, and there was a really good example in the case that where the judge, where the court was examining the limits of the First Amendment, and one of the justices wrote, "Well, your speech is certainly protected by the First Amendment, but you can't shout fire in a crowded movie theater, cause a panic and cause a stampede, hurt people, and then say, hey, First Amendment." So
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You can't just go around saying whatever you want if there's actual consequences that come to, people or businesses or things like that, right? I mean, you couldn't go around and say, hey, I had a bad experience. I think this company's terrible.
yeah,
I mean, that's fair. I mean, you could say that, but what you can't say is, oh, they're operating fraudulently or deceptively, or, especially when people start, this is my favorite part, as we get into that carrier defender stuff, when we go through these reviews and it says fraudulent and deceptive. And then you read the next actual part of the report and it says he was 35 minutes late to the pickup. It's not really fraudulent to be late 30 minutes.
And that's one of the things I would also caution brokers about it when you're putting something up online and you're asked to pick from a list of tags. Make sure you can back up the tag, because if you're talking about somebody being late and you mark them as double broker, that's inflammatory.
Yeah, that might have an issue. But going back to your movie theater thing, I mean, that was my favorite. Right? You wrote the sentence out of your article where it's shouting fire in a theater in the early 20th century or falsely accusing someone of double brokering in 2025. The outcome is still the same.
Yeah, exactly. And the point is, some speech can be harmful, and when it causes harm and it's false, that's where the line of defamation is. Obviously, another defense to defamation is truth. That's actually the best defense. Okay, so if you can back up your statement, obviously, if you shout fire in a crowded movie theater and causes a panic, and the theater is actually on fire, I mean,
then you would obviously have some leg to stand on in a situation like that. But take me through what trucking companies can do when they run into situations where somebody is likely making false statements about them online.
Well, I have always said this, and I think Carrier Defender takes this approach as well. It's like, hey, see if you can get it resolved yourself through a business conversation with the broker. Likely, a lot of these disputes don't arise out of a vacuum. There's some agreed situations that do.
Okay, wait a second. What do you mean arise out of a vacuum? Is that a Michigan thing?
Arise out of a vacuum.
Is that a Michigan thing or just a Dan Artaev thing?
No, it's an expression.
Yeah, that's the first time I've heard that one, I guess. Maybe you studied 20th century expressions while you were looking into your article.
Probably. But basically, disputes don't come out of nowhere. There's probably something to it. There's probably something one side did, the other one did. Somebody's pissed off about something. So
I mean, this is when we work on carrier defender stuff. The first thing we always do is we call the potential client and we just ask them, hey, what happened here? And I had some guy that we were talking to on the phone a couple weeks ago, and I was like, hey, what happened in this situation? He goes, I don't know. I can't remember a single load I did anything wrong. I can't remember a single situation. I'm like, man, you got a report on your company. You have to know something didn't go right somewhere. There was a questionable load, and I think that's the situation where I just disqualified that potential. I'm I don't want to think if you don't know a single load in the past 4 weeks that's gone wrong, but you ended up with a report like this, then you probably do know, and you just don't want to tell them.
Yeah, again, in my experience, it's very rare that somebody just goes out and then posts false statements on any of the forums without any sort of reason behind it. There's usually some sort of dispute, and two people can call each other up, and I'm always a big fan of, hey, just have that conversation. And if there's no no back and forth, no professional courtesy extended from the other side, hey, you can call up Carrier Defender. That's the whole point of Carrier Defender. Mediation and representation of carriers. We defend carriers. That's the motto. And
and I want to go back to your previous point where it is always our first, step of advice. Like I always ask anybody that calls us, it's like, hey, did you try to solve this on your own? And if they say like, maybe a little bit or not at all, like I always, we give, people templates to send out emails. We give them some initial steps, because I'd like to view Carrier Defender as sort of a last resort and not a first option in a situation like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the interesting thing is that these disputes arise both ways. I have some clients who are brokers as well, who deal with situations and carriers. But my whole thing is like, look, there's business reputation out there. You can damage a broker's reputation too, through, for example, Google reviews and things like that. And maybe not necessarily the same impact as a card, but it goes both ways, and both sides have the right to fair treatment and accuracy in reporting online.
Yeah, it's just an unfortunate situation where obviously the carriers are, there's a huge power imbalance between what the carrier can do to the broker's reputation versus what the broker can do to the carrier's reputation.
Right.
But I mean, going through your list here, what can trucking companies do? We have document everything, obviously keeping records of the false reviews, screenshots, timestamps, all the related documents, grab the PODs, rate cons, all these kind of things.
Yeah, and I'll say that, I urge everybody who is any sort of business, whether in trucking or anything else, is like, meticulous records are very important. And it might seem like unnecessary or a pain, but as soon as you get to some sort of legal dispute, you're going to need all that stuff. So it just benefits you to be.
I saw like a really good meme the other day where it's like, how like dads will just keep like anything and everything, like every screw, nut, bolt, piece of wood, like everything just gets put in a basement or a garage somewhere and like never gets used 20 years.
I'm a dad. I have a box of wires.
Yeah. And I saw the meme, and it's like when your dad actually uses like one of those items, and he's like so happy, he's like running downstairs.
Yeah.
So keeping records that you think might be pointless to keep can always, having too much is always better than having too little.
Yeah, and any lawyer will tell you, and I'm just here to reiterate that fact: document.
Yeah, of course. I mean, anything else we can kind of go through with this article? Obviously, I'd like to just kind of make the distinction one more time versus fact versus opinion, just so anybody posting reviews can kind of one more time hear the difference of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't necessarily think that a lot of people will go out and take time out of their day to post an opinion about an experience they had with a trucking company, especially when, for example, I'm not too familiar with the highway platform, but I know for Carrier 411, when somebody posts a freight guard, they're able to click a bunch of boxes and basically label a carrier as fraudulent or a double broker, things like that. So, I just be careful of what you're asserting, and just always ask yourself, if you're posting something, do you have the proof to back it up, or are you just, making assumptions?
Yeah, I would also go a step further, and as you're going to post any type of reviews, just be like, is this really something deserving of this magnitude of review and this level of pain to the business you're posting on, right? Because we've always said these reviews are supposed to be reserved for egregious things, like physical harm, stolen freight, stolen this, and a lot of the time you see like somebody was late a couple hours a day, somebody didn't answer a phone, somebody didn't answer an email, and it's like, these aren't the things the industry was meant to be used for.
Yeah, exactly. And I would also emphasize the fact that whether or not it's opinion, whether or not it's fact, just realize that it's impactful, it's harmful, and you might be right at the very end and win if there's a court case. But do you really want to go to court over something like this? And again, probably 90% of these disputes can be resolved.
Yeah, and as we always say with carrier defender, right, the starting costs of going to court over these things like around $10,000 is a starting cost. So if you can,
Yeah,
resolve things informally, that's always going to be the way you'd want to do it.
it's extremely expensive, and I think prices of that are only going up. So, I would also urge people, and again, one of the things about why we started Carrier Defenders to be a solution that's not a litigation, because it's very, very cost prohibitive and
Yeah, I
inefficient.
mean, I had a lawyer for like a civil matter tell me recently, basically, when two parties want to go to court over something small, like two, three, $400, he goes, most of the time when people go to court, the lawyers are the only ones who end up winning. So if you can avoid going to court over these things, that's obviously ideal.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lot of value in maintaining a good business reputation in this business, because I'm sure, as you know, you'll come across the same carriers and the same brokers over and over again.
Yeah, definitely try to build those relationships. Don't be transactional. You can avoid a lot of these emotional problems. But anyways, Dan, thank you for joining me. If you don't have any closing words, I have somebody trying to fix my apartment's intercom at this exact moment. So
I
not exactly the ideal timing for doing work at 7:40 p.m. on a Friday, but is
I'm
what it is.
surprised anybody's working in Europe at 7:40 on a Friday.
I'm very surprised, but here we are. If you have any closing thoughts, I'll put a link to your article. Obviously,
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on and talking about this article. Again, I would just emphasize the fact that the First Amendment certainly is out there. It protects speech, but not all speech. And remember the analogy of shouting fire in a crowded movie theater.
yeah.
Just
I mean,
can't.
whether it's 1919, 2019, or 3019,
1919, yeah, yeah.
making false statements is not going to be covered in your First Amendment rights.
Yeah, yeah. And the funny thing is, the 1919 case had to do with the right of some guy handing out pro-German Kaiser World War I propaganda in the U.S. So,
Well, as most of our business meetings go, I think that's a good place to leave it on a
yeah,
bombshell like
that's a
that.
good, yeah. And I'll leave it at that. But thanks again for having me. I urge anybody having issues to reach out, and we'll talk you through. And if Carrier Defender can help out, we'll certainly help out.
Okay, thank you once again, Dan. I'll drop a link to your article in the comments somewhere, and have a good rest of your day and weekend.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much.
That's going to wrap up episode 6 of Asset Base with Dan Artaev, founder of Artaev at Law PLLC, also a co-founder over at Carrier Defender. Check out his article in the comments. Have a good weekend, everybody.